I am about to do something that might be brilliant, or it might be profoundly stupid. It's an act that could earn me anything from a king-sized candy bar to a long conversation with local law enforcement. Tonight, I am going trick-or-treating. As a full-grown adult, by myself. The question that has haunted people since, well, probably the 1970s, is this: how old is too old to trick-or-treat? Child psychologists say most kids naturally stop between 12 and 17, but there's no official rule. It's one of society's great unspoken laws. A line in the sand drawn with fun-sized Snickers and neighborhood judgment. And tonight, I'm going to walk right over that line, into the darkness, with nothing but a plastic pumpkin and a horribly misplaced sense of confidence. I want to find out where the magic of Halloween goes to die. Or if I'm lucky, find out that it doesn't. But there's a very real chance this whole experiment ends with me being shamed off a porch by a suburban dad in a fleece vest. There's only one way to find out. The idea started, as most of my questionable ideas do, with a potent mix of nostalgia and a genuine question. I was thinking about Halloween as a kid, the sheer, unadulterated joy of it. The crisp autumn air, the rustle of leaves, the electric feeling of being out after dark on a mission for sugar. A few decades later, that feeling is a distant memory. For adults, Halloween seems to have morphed into either taking your own kids door to door or going to a party where the main treat is a lukewarm keg. I miss the original version. It turns out, I'm not alone. A 2024 survey showed that a whopping 77% of adults feel nostalgic about their childhood trick-or-treating experiences. The problem is the unwritten social contract. The tradition is, by and large, seen as something for children. There's this invisible barrier you cross somewhere in your teens where it just becomes weird. People start asking questions. You get the side eye, the hesitation at the candy bowl. There's genuine social pressure to age out of it, and plenty of adults who have tried have reported feeling judged or shamed. And in some places, it's more than just social pressure. While there's no nationwide age limit, some cities have actual ordinances. In Chesapeake, Virginia, for instance, the law was updated in 2019 to make anyone over the age of 14 trick-or-treating guilty of a misdemeanor. While city officials say they rarely enforce it, the fact that the law even exists speaks volumes about how seriously some communities take this. It's designed to give officers a way to handle disturbances, which tells you exactly what they might expect from older participants. Other towns have similar rules. In Belleville, Illinois, you can be fined for trick-or-treating if you're older than 12. So, depending on where you are, you're not just breaking a social norm, you could be breaking a local ordinance. It's a holiday tradition that, for some reason, comes with a legal gray area and the potential for public humiliation. This is the minefield I'm about to walk into. So, if I was going to do this, I had to do it right. I couldn't just show up in a hoodie and jeans. That's not an adult trick-or-treating. That's just a guy asking for free food. Effort is everything. The costume had to be undeniable. It needed to scream, "I am here for wholesome, perhaps misguided fun," not, "I am here to cause problems." It needed to be disarming, friendly, and utterly ridiculous. After weeks of contemplation, I landed on the perfect choice, a 7-foot tall inflatable T-Rex costume. Think about it. It's impossible to be truly intimidated by an inflatable dinosaur. It's clumsy. It waddles. The tiny arms are useless. It is the physical embodiment of harmless absurdity. My theory was that the sheer comedy of the costume would short-circuit the judgmental part of the human brain. You can't look at a giant bobbing dinosaur on your doorstep and immediately think, "This person is a social deviant." Your first thought is more likely, "What on earth am I looking at?" And that moment of confused amusement is the window I needed. Besides, according to the National Retail Federation, 51% of adults plan on dressing up for Halloween this year, so I'm tapping right into that spirit. My costume was my ridiculous, inflatable shield. Next, the rules of engagement. I had to set a personal code of conduct to be as respectful as possible. Rule number 1, full costume, always. No taking off the dinosaur head between houses. I had to be fully committed to the bit. Rule number 2, only visit houses with their porch lights on, the universal sign for trick-or-treaters welcome. I wasn't about to bother anyone who wasn't already opted in. Rule number 3, be unfailingly polite. A clear trick or treat, followed by a "thank you so much, happy Halloween," no matter what happened. Rule number 4, no lingering. Accept whatever happens, candy or rejection, and move on. The goal was to collect reactions, not argue with a homeowner. Rule number 5, have a sense of humor. If someone makes a joke about my age, I laugh with them. If I'm challenged to dance for candy, I dance the best T-Rex dance I can muster. With my strategy in place, the only thing left was the overwhelming sense of dread. My heart was pounding as I zipped myself into the T-Rex suit. The tiny plastic window in the neck of the dinosaur became my entire world. The internal fan whirred to life, and the nylon skin of the beast inflated around me, transforming me from a nervous man into a 7-foot-tall prehistoric dork. I grabbed my plastic pumpkin, took a deep, slightly recycled air breath, and waddled out the door. The sun had set, the air was cold, and the streets were already filled with tiny ghosts and goblins. My experiment had begun. I chose my testing ground carefully, a quintessential suburban neighborhood. Manicured lawns, 2-car garages, and festive decorations everywhere. Jack-o'-lanterns grinned from every porch, and inflatable ghosts danced in the breeze. It was the perfect habitat for the common trick-or-treater. And I, in my colossal reptilian form, was the invasive species. Every step was a struggle against my own self-consciousness. I could feel parents' eyes on me as they guided their little princesses and superheroes down the sidewalk. They weren't looking at a person. They were looking at a spectacle. A waddling 7-foot-tall question mark. I approached the first house. The porch light was a welcoming beacon. A string of orange lights framed the door where a bowl of candy sat on a small table. I could see a family inside. This was it. My tiny T-Rex arms were comically useless, so I couldn't even knock. I sort of nudged the door with my inflated head. The door swung open, and a man in his late 40s stared at me. His face went through a rapid series of emotions. First, surprise, then deep, profound confusion. His eyes scanned up and then down, trying to process the sheer scale of the thing on his porch. He looked past me, probably searching for the small child I was obviously accompanying. He found no one, just me, a solitary dinosaur. There was a long, awkward pause. I could hear the hum of my costume's fan. Finally, from behind the man, a woman's voice called out, "Who is it, honey?" He didn't turn. He just said, his voice flat with disbelief, "It's a dinosaur." I knew I had to break the silence. Through the fabric, I squeaked out, "Trick or treat!" The man just stood there for another second, a slight smile twitching at his lips. He looked at the candy bowl, then back at me. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Okay," he said, shaking his head. "Okay. I respect the effort." He reached into the bowl and dropped a handful of miniature chocolate bars into my pumpkin. "You're a little big for this, aren't you?" he asked, but there was no malice in it. It was a genuine question from a man whose worldview had just been slightly tilted. "Thank you so much. Happy Halloween," I chirped and waddled away. One door down, one handful of candy acquired. I hadn't been turned away, but I hadn't exactly been welcomed with open arms either. It was a neutral, slightly bizarre start. The second house was different. As I approached, I could hear loud, festive music. The entire lawn was a graveyard of fake tombstones and skeletons. A woman in a full witch's costume, complete with a pointy hat and green face paint, was cackling as she handed out candy. She saw me waddling up the driveway and her eyes lit up. "Oh, now this is what I'm talking about," she boomed. She completely ignored the kids in front of her and pointed a gnarled finger at me. "Look at this. A full-grown T-Rex. This is the spirit of Halloween right here." I didn't even have to say trick or treat. She grabbed her candy bowl, bypassed my pumpkin, and started trying to stuff candy into my T-Rex's mouth slit. "You get the big ones," she declared, shoving 2 full-size chocolate bars into my costume. "Anyone who puts this much effort in deserves the good stuff. I don't care if you're 9 or 90. This woman believed Halloween should be for everyone, and my ridiculous costume was, to her, a joyful expression of that belief. She asked to take a picture with me, and I posed with my tiny arms outstretched as she cackled. As I walked away, my pumpkin significantly heavier, I felt a surge of validation. Maybe this wasn't such a crazy idea after all. My confidence was soaring. I was the king of the dinosaurs, the conqueror of suburbia. I waddled up to the third house, my inflatable tail swishing with a newfound swagger. This house was quieter. A single, tasteful pumpkin sat by the door. I gave my signature head nudge knock. A man opened the door holding a small bowl. He looked at me, then at my pumpkin, and then back at me. He sighed. It was a deep, weary sigh. "Look, man," he started, his voice gentle but firm. "Aren't you a little old for this?" There it was, the phrase I had been dreading. It wasn't aggressive, but it was clear disapproval. "The candy is for the little kids, you know." I was momentarily stunned. My T-Rex head drooped a little. I stayed in character, though. I just stood there, a silent, sad dinosaur. He must have seen the pathetic slump of my costume shoulders because he sighed again. "All right, fine," he said, his resolve crumbling just a bit. He reached into his bowl and very deliberately picked out a single tiny box of raisins. He dropped it into my pumpkin like a charity donation. "Happy Halloween," he said, his tone making it clear that he wanted me off his property. I mumbled a thank you and retreated, the triumphant swagger gone from my waddle. A box of raisins. It was the candy equivalent of a participation trophy. The message was clear. You can play, but we both know you don't belong here. The initial high was gone, replaced by the sting of social awkwardness and the rattling sound of a single, lonely box of raisins in my pumpkin. The night was just getting started. After the raisin incident, my confidence was shaken. The festive street suddenly felt a little colder. I decided to move to a different block, hoping for a fresh start. This street was darker, with fewer decorations and more sporadic porch lights. It felt less like a Halloween celebration and more like a quiet street that was reluctantly tolerating one. This, I thought, is where I'll find the real opposition. I targeted a modest brick house with a single pumpkin on the stoop. The light was on, so it was fair game. I waddled up the long driveway, my inflatable hide scraping against a rose bush. I knocked, and the door was opened almost immediately by a woman in her 60s. She was holding a massive bowl of candy, smiling warmly, but her smile froze the second she saw me. It didn't just fade. It vanished, replaced by a look of stern disapproval. "Trick or treat?" I offered, my voice small and muffled. She looked me up and down, her eyes narrowed. She just shook her head slowly, a single sharp motion. Then she deliberately turned off her porch light. The click of the switch echoed in the silence. And then she closed the door in my face. Not a slam, but a firm, final click. I was left standing in the sudden darkness, a 7-foot-tall symbol of rejected festivity. There was no negotiation, no teasing. It was a nonverbal, but incredibly clear, "Get lost." My heart was still stinging from that silent rejection when I approached the next house. This one was brightly lit, and I could see a man watching me through the front window as I came up the walk. He opened the door before I could even knock, arms crossed over his chest, a scowl chiseled onto his face. "Can I help you?" he asked. His tone was not friendly. "Trick or treat," I said, trying to sound cheerful. He didn't even glance at my pumpkin. He just stared at me. "You've got to be kidding me," he grumbled. "This is for kids. Actual kids. Do you not see the children running around? You're taking candy out of their mouths." I was taken aback by the direct hostility. "I'm just having some fun, sir. Fun?" He cut me off. You look ridiculous. Grow up. Get a life. Don't you have something better to do on a Friday night than begging for candy like a child?" Each word was a little hammer blow. This man saw my participation not as harmless fun, but as inappropriate and even pathetic. In his view, Halloween is for kids, and I was on the wrong side of that line. "I'm sorry to have bothered you," I mumbled and began to back away. "Yeah, you are," he called after me as I retreated. "Go home." I didn't just walk away, I fled. I waddled as fast as my inflatable legs could carry me, my giant dinosaur head bobbing in panicked rhythm. I felt a hot flush of shame. He hadn't just rejected me, he had actively belittled me. I ducked behind a large oak tree to catch my breath, the whirring of my costume's fan roaring in my ears. The fun had completely evaporated. This was just humiliating. I seriously considered calling it a night. Just as I was about to start the process of deflation, I saw a woman walking her dog on the other side of the street. She stopped and stared at me hiding behind the tree. Then she pulled out her phone and started talking into it, glancing over in my direction. My blood ran cold. Was she calling the police? The thought of having to explain my inflatable T-Rex costume to an officer was my worst-case scenario. This was a new level of reaction, not just judgment, but suspicion. I was no longer just an awkward adult. I was a potential threat. A strange man in a giant costume lurking in the shadows. That was it. I was done. This was too much. The spectrum of reactions was far more intense than I had anticipated. It wasn't just about getting candy. It was about navigating a complex social landscape where I was an unwelcome intruder. I had found the hostility I was looking for, and it was uglier and more painful than I had imagined. Okay, this was way more intense than I expected. I've been welcomed, confused people, been politely shamed, and now I've been genuinely yelled at and possibly reported as a neighborhood threat. And it really makes me wonder, what would you have done? Be honest. A 7-foot inflatable T-Rex shows up at your door, clearly a grown-up inside. Do you give them candy? Do you laugh? Do you tell them to grow up? Let me know in the comments what your honest-to-goodness reaction would be. And hey, if you're enjoying this journey into the heart of social awkwardness, consider subscribing, because I have a feeling the night isn't over just yet. I was ready to give up. My pumpkin contained a respectable but emotionally tainted haul of candy, 1 box of raisins, and a heavy dose of shame. I had faced the judgment, and it had won. Walking back, head hung low, I passed a small house with a porch swing when the front door opened. An elderly woman with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders peered out. "Oh my goodness," she said, her voice soft and kind. "Are you leaving so soon?" I stopped, surprised. Yes, ma'am. I think I'm done for the night." "Nonsense," she said with a gentle smile. "You come right up here. I've been watching you from my window. That is the most wonderful costume I've seen all evening." Hesitantly, I waddled up her walkway. She gestured for me to wait, disappeared inside and came back with a small paper plate holding a giant homemade caramel apple. I made these for my grandchildren, but they've already gone home, she said, carefully placing it in my pumpkin. When I was a little girl, trick-or-treating was for everyone. We'd go out in big groups, young and old. It was about community, seeing your neighbors and sharing a little joy. She looked at my costume with genuine delight. It does my heart good to see someone keeping that spirit alive, no matter how old they are. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old for joy. I was speechless. Her simple act of kindness felt like a healing balm on my bruised ego. It was a powerful reminder that for every person who wants to gatekeep a tradition, there's someone else who wants to share it. I thanked her profusely and walked away with a renewed sense of purpose. The experiment wasn't over. A few streets over, the vibe changed again. The quiet, judgmental streets gave way to a block buzzing with life. Music was spilling out from an open garage, which had been turned into a full-blown Halloween party. Adults in costumes were mingling on the lawn. As I waddled past, a man dressed as a pirate spotted me. "Whoa! A T-Rex! Get over here!" he shouted, waving me toward the party. Suddenly, I was the center of attention, but in a completely different way. Instead of suspicion, there was celebration. They weren't seeing a weird adult trick-or-treating. They were seeing a guy in an awesome costume. "That costume is epic, man," a woman dressed as a vampire said, handing me a can of soda. They didn't have candy, but they insisted I have some party snacks. It was a fascinating discovery. In a context of adults celebrating Halloween, I wasn't an outsider. I was one of them. The costume was my ticket in. The next encounter was perhaps the most surprising. I approached a house with a young family on the porch. The dad was holding the candy bowl, while the mom was helping their little girl, dressed as a ladybug, adjust her antennae. As I waddled up, the father's face took on that familiar skeptical expression. I could feel the "aren't you a little old" speech coming, but before he could say a word, the little ladybug gasped. "A dinosaur!" she screamed, her eyes wide with pure, undiluted awe. She ran right up to me and hugged my giant inflatable leg. "Roar!" she commanded. I obliged, letting out the best muffled roar I could manage. She giggled uncontrollably. The father's skeptical expression melted away, replaced by a grin. He looked at his daughter, then at me. "Well," he said, laughing, "you heard her? The dinosaur gets a treat." He let his daughter pick out a candy bar, and she ceremoniously placed it in my pumpkin. "Thank you, Mr. Dinosaur," she said. It was a moment of pure magic. The very person the tradition is supposedly for, a child, was my biggest advocate. She didn't see an adult breaking the rules. She saw a dinosaur, and it made her Halloween better. My final stop was a house with a young couple on the porch. They saw me coming and started laughing. When I got to the door and said "trick or treat," the guy held up a hand. "Not so fast," he said, a playful glint in his eye. "We saw your waddle from down the street. It needs work." If you want the candy, you've got to dance for it. So I did it. Right there on their porch, a 7-foot-tall inflatable T-Rex began to dance. I did the waddle, I did the tiny arms shuffle, I bobbed my giant head. It was absurd and clumsy. The couple howled with laughter. They clapped, they cheered, and when I was done, they didn't just give me a few pieces. They dumped the entire rest of their bowl into my pumpkin. "That was the best thing I've seen all night," the woman said, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. "You earned it." I walked away from that last house with a pumpkin overflowing with candy and a feeling of profound triumph. I had run the full gauntlet of human reactions, and I had come out the other side with a story. Walking home, the cool night air felt refreshing after being cooped up in my nylon bubble. Back in my living room, I unzipped the costume, emerging from my dinosaur shell like a sweaty, triumphant butterfly. I dumped the contents of my pumpkin onto the floor. It was a glorious, colorful mountain of sugar. Miniature chocolates, lollipops, full-sized candy bars, a bag of chips, one homemade caramel apple, and a single solitary box of raisins. It was a physical manifestation of my entire night, a story told in candy. So, what did I learn? I learned that the answer to "how old is too old to trick or treat" is incredibly complicated. There is no universal answer because every front door you knock on opens into a different world with a different set of rules. I met the confused and the surprised. I met the enthusiastic supporters who believe joy has no age limit. I met the gentle gatekeepers with their raisins and soft disapproval. And yes, I met the openly judgmental, the ones who told me to grow up. But the experiment revealed something more. It revealed a tension between the prescribed rules of a tradition and the human desire for joy and nostalgia. The people who reacted negatively were, in their own way, trying to protect something they see as a sacred space for childhood innocence. And my presence was a violation of that. But the people who reacted positively were protecting something else. The idea that a holiday should be about community, fun, and shared celebration. The grandmother with the caramel apple, the party goers, the little girl dressed as a ladybug, they weren't just giving me candy. They were giving me permission. Permission to be joyful. Permission to be silly. Permission to participate. The negative encounters were painful. Being yelled at and shamed in public is not a pleasant experience. But the positive encounters were powerful enough to eclipse them entirely. The kindness of the elderly woman, the laughter of the couple who made me dance, the pure awe in a child's eyes. Those are the moments that will stick with me. In the end, I think I found my answer. How old is too old to trick or treat? You're too old when you're no longer willing to risk the disapproval. You're too old when the fear of being judged outweighs the desire for a moment of silly, nostalgic fun. There isn't a secret age limit, but there is most certainly a social boundary. Crossing it requires a bit of courage, a thick skin, and preferably a ridiculous costume. Maybe growing up doesn't have to mean leaving these things behind. Maybe it just means you have to be brave enough to wear the dinosaur costume.